Alex was a regular at antique shops. He loved finding things with a story to tell that would add character to his apartment. One day, while walking around town, he came across a small shop with an antique clock and sandbox in the window. The clock was made of dark wood with carvings and decorated with metal parts. In the center of the case was a glass sandbox, where a thin stream of sand slowly poured from top to bottom. "It's yours if you take it right now," offered the seller, a strange old man with a hoarse voice. "What's special about this clock?" Alex asked, examining it more closely. The seller smiled. "It shows not only the time but also what's coming." Alex considered it just a marketing gimmick, but the clock caught his attention. He bought it and took it home. That same night, lying in bed, Alex noticed something strange. When the sand in the hourglass turned over, a vision appeared before his eyes. For a moment he saw something fall off the table and break in his apartment the next morning. "This must be a dream," he muttered. But the next morning, at the exact moment the sand turned over again, his favorite cup rolled off the table and shattered, just as he had seen it. At first, the visions that the clock showed seemed harmless to Alex. They predicted small events, a call from a friend, rain, a broken TV cable. He even began to find it funny, as if the clock was playing a game with him. But over time, they began to show something disturbing. One night, lying in the semi-darkness of his bedroom, he saw the sand in the clock turn over. Looking at the sandbox, Alex froze. A scene appeared in it where he was standing at the front door, and someone in the shadows was stretching out a hand to him. "What nonsense," he muttered, trying to convince himself that it was just his imagination. The next evening, he heard a knock on the door. When Alex opened it, he saw a man asking him for money. It was exactly like in the clock, except that this time, nothing bad happened. But the visions became clearer and darker. Alex saw accidents, falling objects, unfamiliar faces screaming in terror. Each event occurred at the exact moment when the sand completely spilled. And then, one night, when he looked at the clock again, the sand turned over, and he saw himself. He was standing in his room, a figure in the shadows sneaking up behind him. Then everything went dark. Alex jumped out of bed, cold sweat running down his forehead. "This won't happen," he whispered, grabbing the clock from the shelf. He tried to stop the sand, turned the clock over, but the sand did not obey. It continued to spill as if some force controlled it. Alex tried to break it, but the clock remained intact. Its glass sandbox seemed indestructible. Each time the sand turned over, the vision became brighter. He saw himself more clearly, scared, pale, with a shadow that slowly loomed over him. Alex couldn't shake off the obsessive fear. With each turn of the sand, the visions became more and more real, and time was running out. On the last night, he sat in front of the clock, watching the sand slowly pour out. It seemed that every sound in the apartment became louder, the creaking of the floorboards, the whisper of the wind outside the window, the ticking of the hands. He tried to fight. Again and again, Alex grabbed the clock, shook it, tried to pour out the sand, but it did not obey. The grains of sand fell with perfect precision, without stopping, like an inevitable countdown. "You will not take me," he shouted, throwing the clock on the floor. But instead of breaking, the clock remained intact. A quiet but deep hum was heard from inside, as if something had come to life inside it. When the last grains of sand poured out, the room filled with icy cold. There was a soft whisper in the air, as if the watch was speaking to him. Alex felt the floor beneath his feet disappear. "No!" he shouted, but it was too late. Everything went dark and he felt his body dissolve. The last thing he saw was the watch slowly disappearing into the darkness, its sandbox full again. The next morning, the watch was in the window of the same antique shop where Alex had bought it. The seller put it back in place with a smirk, as if waiting for the next customer. They say that if you look closely at the sandbox, you can see the faces of those who once owned the watch. Now Alex's face appeared for a moment every time the sand turned.